So I'm back here with another destroyed chain just for your entertainment. This is a Oregon 325 semi-chisel that came on a saw that I purchased. I'm going to show you what's wrong with it, and then we'll just fix it with a file, because why not? So we'll start off with this cutter here. We'll zoom right in. Okay, so this cutter here, they have run it dull. They have attempted to sharpen it, but have used way too much angle on that. It's also very poor file height control on all these left-hand cutters. If we work around, they all have too much angle. They've all had the corner very rounded off. Things aren't great. So we're going to have to remove a lot to fix that. If we look at the other side's cutters, our right-hand cutters, they've been filed very differently. They don't have enough angle across them. The top plates have rolled back, and file height control was a big issue over there as well. I'll quickly show you this chain from the side and show you why it's not going to have a long and happy life. Alright, so here we are looking at it from the side. The biggest problem this chain has is they've continued cutting with it when it's dull. They've kept forcing it, trying to make it cut, and they've absolutely wiped out the heel of the cutters and the tie straps. So you can see how close that's getting to that rivet. By the time I'm done filing this thing, it's not going to have much life left in it anyway, and even if it did, it wouldn't be able to be used for very long. Setting depth gauges on chains that have been done like this is really difficult, because when the cutter rocks back on that initial contact, it drives the heel of the cutter, the rear of the cutter, down into the bar, so it has something to push against. With no heel on it, it can be tricky getting the depth gauges right. This will never cut quite right again. It will cut, but not fantastically, and it's more than likely going to fracture up into these rivets at some stage. But I can still get a little bit of life out of this thing. It's not something you'd run on a new bar and a new sprocket, but I'll keep it around. There'll be some crappy job I can do with it, and if it breaks, it breaks. Just on a quick side note, I am going to try something using a couple of different cameras. I get better audio if I record on that, but the phone can zoom in better. So you guys potentially will be seeing footage from this side where my phone is, and that side on the, I guess the 08S camera, because that's what it's mounted on. So there you go. The old 08S was a multi-function power head, could do a lot of things. They were post-hole augers, drills, impact guns, water pumps. Also make a pretty handy camera stand if you need one. Okay, so I'm just going to start on this side because it's bad. You guys are going to have a much better view of this than I am, because now I have two cameras to deal with. I'm going to be in an uncomfortable position, but let's do this. So you can see our filing angle should be like that. And we are a long, long way off from that. If we zoom in on it a bit, we are a long way. So this isn't going to be like normal chain sharpening. You shouldn't be doing this every time. I'm going to have to remove a lot of material to make this work. So just going to have at it, basically. You guys, I'll leave you zoomed in. I'll try moving you back. I'll try and give you a few different angles of what's happening, and we'll just fix the chain. So on these initial ones here, where I'm just removing material, so on these first passes where I'm just trying to clear this out and get it back to where it needs to be, it's not going to matter what you do with the file. You can have it up, down, you can rock it all around, you can do whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. At this stage, I'm not trying to form the shape on the cutter. All I'm trying to do is get back to where it needs to be, and then I'll actually focus on trying to get the angles right. So there's lots of different advice out there on how to do this. Probably the most widely known would be Bucking Billy, and he uses like a rocking boat motion. If that works for you, go for it. If you like holding the file handle up while you're doing it, or down, or whatever, you can do whatever you like. The important thing is to make sure we clear out the metal and leave the correct amount of the file up above the cutter when we get to the end. So like I was saying, it doesn't matter. I could tilt like that. Hopefully you can see it on that other camera. I can tilt it down like this. Doesn't matter what I'm doing at this stage. I'm just trying to get that back. Now, as we're starting to come into the being in line with where we need to be, I need to start focusing more on what I'm actually doing. Okay, now we're back to roughly the shape we need. I need to make sure that I've got the right amount of file up. If you do find yourself doing this with these Carlton 325s, pretty much have it riding on top of that tie strap. You can't be too low with these due to the corner design. As long as you're not digging right down deep into that drive link, you're going to be fine. Okay, so now I'm just finishing it off. Light pressure. I got the angles I want. And we're done. Just knock off some of that burr. That one's done. Nice and easy. I'll drop the camera down. You can have a look at it and then we'll keep going. So I'm going to use a brush just to clear out all that mess. You can see there'll be a big burr on the inside. You can knock that off. You can use a bit of wood, whatever you got handy, your file handle. If we zoom in on it. So there we are zoomed in on it. So we have nice, bright, shiny metal the entire way across everything. There's no lip up on the top. There's no lip on the side. That one is nice and sharp. So super simple with these. We'll just keep working our way through it and just talk random things as I'm doing it to keep myself amused. All right, so we're on to our second cutter. While we're doing this, all the chain manufacturers are going to give you a recommendation of the amount of file that's held above the tooth. So the amount that's held up above the top of the top plate. Oregon's made it easy for us over the years. They've had the same recommendation from the 1950s, the early 1950s, through to current days. Their recommendation is that you should hold 20% of the file above the tooth. Husky's telling us the same thing. Carlton used to tell us the same thing, 1/5 or 20%. Still's history on this is much more complex. They told us 1/10 or 10% back in the day, and then they changed it to being 1/5, that 20%, and I think now it's 25 or something. All those recommendations are good and well. But I would challenge anybody who sharpens with a file to tell me what percentage of the file they have above the tooth at any given time. I have no idea. Those numbers are essentially meaningless. Like, I could not tell you if I just hold that file 10, 15, 20, 25, 23, whatever percent above that cutter while I was doing it. There is no real reference. You have no way of knowing. All you're going by is a look. After you've done this enough, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what it should look like. So when you're beginning, don't get too frustrated with that idea of it having to be a percentage above the tooth. What you're looking for is the end result. You're better off measuring the final result that you get. Another thing that can be helpful if you're just starting off is if you have a dealer that still sells chains in rolls, ask him if they can break you out a left and a right cutter of the chain you're using. Use that as your reference. Stick it up on the bench behind you. Throw it in your toolbox with your files. Do whatever you want to do. Just give yourself a reference. You can go back when you finish sharpening a tooth, look at it and go, did I get it right or wrong? Not all chain manufacturers make it easy for us. They will provide a new chain sharpened in some pretty stupid ways, to be honest. So it mightn't work great depending on the type of chain you're using, but it can give you a reference point. Doing that is exactly how I learnt to square file. I had a left and a right cutter of the Still RSLF chain that I was running, and I carried those links with me. Every time I sharpened it, I used them as a reference. I had a look to see if mine looked like those original ones. So, definitely a helpful tool. You can definitely get you pointed in the right direction. You're going to notice as I'm filing, I'm knocking the file out. don't do what I do and hit it against metal. Try and hit it against wood. When you're sharpening, when you're out and about, this is easier because you're usually on a stump or something. I keep mistakenly hitting it up here. If I hit it on the soft jaws, it wouldn't be as bad. So all I'm doing there is going down, clearing it out, because this corner is a long way back and I need to go a long way back in this cutter to fix that angle. So I need to try and get that file height correct by going down. In all seriousness, if you are new to sharpening chains, Oregon chain can be a very good option for you. The EXL is a lot harder. It files a lot like Still RS. Most of these semi-chisels are still on the older design, and these things are very nice to file. They're much more user-friendly than some of the harder chains. They still hold an edge well. They're a very good chain. They're generally available pretty cheap, so you can practice on it. It's quite likely you'll be able to find a dealer that sells these in rolls. So they will be able to give you a few to start off with. They generally give you witness marks. It's a pretty good chain to start off with when you're learning to file. I'll try and zoom you right in for one, see if it makes a difference. Yeah, you have an up close look at what I'm doing. So now that I'm getting close to that shape, you may have noticed that the file tilted down more. I'm trying to finish off the shape that I'm looking for on this. Oregon's recommended specs for this chain when you're filing. So it should be a 30-degree filing angle. So you angle across the top, and they want you to hold the file down 10 degrees. They do that because these are a reasonably small corner radius chain, semi-chisel. And what you'll end up with is about 70 or 75 degrees of side plate angle and about 55 degrees of top plate cutting angle if you do it right. And it's how these chains generally work best. Run a fair bit of this stuff. This one's Husky branded, which is a H25. This chain was made by Oregon. In Oregon, it's called a BPX. This would be a 21 BPX. It's a very basic chain. It's definitely not one of their higher level ones. I think it's called the Control Series or something like that. It's pretty basic, but it is very effective. You're not gonna impress anyone by telling them you run this stuff. Yeah, it's a 325 semi-chisel with a bumper link. People will tell you it's a homeowner chain. But I guarantee you, these things cut a lot of wood every year out there in the world. They're very common, they're reasonably priced, they do a good job. It won't cut as fast as a full chisel initially after sharpening, but you'll catch up to the full chisel pretty quick as the performance on them drops off quite rapidly. Back to the beginning. I did 3 or 4 of these off camera. Alright, so I'm going to swap everything around. You guys can try and see it from the other side because it'll allow me to get some different camera angles of things. Alright, long story short, screw that. I cannot make this happen with the camera in my way. You guys can basically see it from behind or not at all. A lot of debate about whether you're better off sharpening with a file or a grinder. I've done both. I just prefer files, each to their own. I can create what I need to create with a file pretty easily. I've had a lot of practice at it. It allows me to do it anywhere. I'm not dependent on having power, which is a big plus. So for me, I prefer files. I guess if anyone's made it this long into a video and can tolerate looking at the poor stuff we've got going on there, we might as well discuss something else. It is unlikely that I can match a factory shape exactly with a file. But you need to ask yourself, is that a bad thing or not? From the factory, chains come with a variety of different angles. What they're aiming for is that out-of-the-box performance. They know that a lot of chain is sold with those A-B comparison. I bought chain X and I ran it against chain Y. This one's faster, so people will buy it. There's not a good representation of how that chain is going to perform through most of its life, because you are not going to sharpen it that way. Why are you not going to sharpen it that way? You have a lot more information about how it is about to be used than the manufacturer ever will. They can recommend some angles. They all do. They give you recommended angles. Is that the best angle? Or more to the point, is there a best angle? The answer is no. There is not going to be one set of universal angles that are best suited to any chain for your application. I'll do a video where I go through this. It'll be a long one, but I figure if you suffered through me filing for this long, you might as well hear something else. When they sell this chain, they have a rough idea what it's going to be used on. And to be honest, manufacturers have an easier time with like 325 or 38 low pro chains on this front. Where it becomes difficult is things like your full size 38 chain. Say I buy a Stihl RS chain. They don't know if I'm going to use it in Europe cutting beech or spruce. They don't know if I'm going to be in America on the West Coast cutting softer woods, or the East Coast where they've got harder woods. They don't know if I'm going to be in the rainforest. They don't know where I am or what I'm doing with it. You do. You know what you're going to do with it. They also don't know when they sell you a 3/8 chain, are you running it on a 260 or a 261 or a 360? Are you running it on a 90cc or 120cc saw? They don't know that. They don't know what bar length you're running. If I set a chain up to work on an 18-inch bar and put that on, say, my MS310, is that going to be the ideal set of angles if I put that same chain on my 880? No. All that stuff can be optimized to the job that you are doing. All these angles can be changed to better suit the saw. The thing it all comes down to at the end of the day is how much power you have available per cutter that is engaged in the wood. You might be a stand up and buck guy. You might be running a 28-inch bar on a 60cc saw, but you're only using it to cut wood that's 12 to 14 inches in diameter. The chain you sharpen to suit that is going to be very different to the one you would do to suit that 28-inch bar being buried constantly. Because there's a different amount of power available to each one of those cutters that's in the wood. The more cutters you have in the wood, the less power each one has available to it to cut. There are a lot of things that affect the amount of power that's required from the saw. If I dig deep and put a lot of side plate angle in this, it can cut faster, but it requires more power to be able to pull that through the wood. If I have power available to pull it through the wood, that might be a good idea. If I don't, then yeah, it's not. The same thing happens with depth gauge settings. Most people hear the idea that a depth gauge controls the depth of the cut, and obviously assume that a thicker chip means we're cutting wood faster. So having a lower depth gauge will thus cut faster, right? Doesn't necessarily work that way. If you don't have the power, adding depth gauge is going to make things worse, not better. Adding more side plate angle is the same. To a point, it will make a chain cut faster, but it's very dependent on the wood type and the saw being used and the cutting technique being used. Everyone is different. So this local information that you have, you know the bar length you're running, you know the saw you're using, you know your cutting technique. That is what allows you to generally make a chain cut faster than a factory chain with a round file. You know what you're going to do with it, you know how you're going to use it, you can set that chain up to perform at its best for your conditions. Your saw, your chain, your bar length, your wood type. It takes a lot of experimentation, but you're going to figure it out eventually. The chains I run on the big saws, the 404 stuff, I sharpen it more in line with how a chain on a harvester is sharpened. In the hardwoods I cut, I am not going to get much self-feeding at the best of times. There's no point in me trying to create more side plate angle to get self-feeding because it's not going to happen. So the best thing for me to do is sacrifice some of that self-feeding ability, because I'm going to have to make it cut anyway, in favour of grabbing durability. So what's that mean? That means my file tilts. I'm taking side plate angle out. I'm deliberately trying to do that. You don't have to take side plate angle out with a tilt, but it's a technique that I'm using to take side plate angle out while keeping in as much top plate cutting angle as possible. It's going to be different for everyone and their application, what works best for them. But yeah, this needs to be an entirely separate video where I explain it and demonstrate it, but that's some of the basics. Right. So this thing's about as fixed as it's going to get. That's probably all I'm going to do with it. So, slightly useful tip, if I can get it to show up. When you adjust the depth gauges on a chain that has these little bumper links, it's very hard to shape the leading edge of this depth gauge. To do that, you want to run it around the end of the bar. You want to get it to poke out. So as we go around the nose radius, we can see that the depth gauge separates from that bump, that little humped link. That's how you shape the front of them. So if you find yourself with this style of chain, that's how you do that. But anyway, we're just going to leave it at that for the day, and we'll move on to something else.